In November 1918, the guns fell silent, but the sky still hummed. Over the scarred fields of Flanders, Sopwith Camels and Fokker D-7s circled one last time before pilots banked home. The Great War had baptized air power in fire and blood. 4 years earlier, aircraft were fragile toys, wood, wire, and linen, good for scouting, dropping flechettes by hand. By Armistice Day, they carried machine guns, bombs, and radios. The infant had teeth. Between the wars, theorists argued over what those teeth could chew. In Italy, Giulio Due screamed from the page, "The bomber will always get through." His 1921 manifesto, Il dominio dell'aria, promised that fleets of heavy aircraft could pound cities into surrender, making armies and navies obsolete. Across the Channel, Britain's Hugh Trenchard built the Royal Air Force on the same gospel, strategic bombing as the shortcut to victory. In America, Billy Mitchell sank a captured German battleship with bombs in 1921 and was court-martialed for shouting too loud. Yet budgets shrank. The world wanted plowshares, not wings. By 1933, the RAF had fewer than 1,000 aircraft. The U.S. Army Air Corps scraped along with 1,200. Germany, forbidden military aviation by Versailles, trained gliders in secret. In the Soviet Union, Tupolev designed the TB-3, a 4-engine giant that could lift 2 tons of bombs, while Stalin purged the designers who built it. Then came 1936. Over Guernica, Heinkel HE-51 and Junkers U-52s of the Condor Legion turned a market day into an inferno. Picasso painted the scream. The world heard the message. Air power could kill civilians faster than any artillery. Franco's rebels won the Spanish Civil War, partly because Madrid's sky belonged to the Luftwaffe. Across the Pacific, Japan watched. Since 1931, its army aircraft had strafed Chinese villages in Manchuria. Now the Imperial Navy trained carrier pilots at night, a secret art no one else had mastered. In Tokyo, Admiral Yamamoto sketched arrows across maps of Pearl Harbor, convinced that 6 carriers could cripple a fleet in one morning. In Britain, a radar chain home, bristled along the coast, crude but alive. Scientists whispered of jets. Whittle's engine spun on a test bench. In Germany, Messerschmitt rolled out the Bf-109, 350 miles per hour of aluminum anger. The arms race was no longer theoretical. September 1, 1939. Dawn over the Polish border. Stukas screamed down in 70-degree dives, sirens wailing like banshees. The Polish cavalry, myth says they charged tanks with lances. Truth says they never stood a chance against 500-kilogram bombs. By noon, the Luftwaffe fighters owned the sky. Warsaw's radio begged for help that never came. That same week, RAF Wellingtons flew leaflets over the Ruhr. "We can do to you what we did to Guernica," but their bombs stayed home. France's Armée de l'Air had modern Dewadine fighters, yet its generals still thought of aircraft as flying artillery for the army. Doctrine lagged hardware by a decade. By May 1940, the lag became fatal. Panzer columns knifed through the Ardennes. Above them, Stukas paralyzed French divisions with precision terror. The RAF's ferry battles, slow, underarmed, were slaughtered over Sedan. In 6 weeks, the Wehrmacht conquered Western Europe on a tide of 87-octane and U-87 dive brakes. Yet cracks appeared. Over Dunkirk, Spitfires and Hurricanes tangled with 109s in swirling dogfights. For the first time, the RAF fought on equal terms. Goering promised Hitler the British would beg after a few days of bombing. He was wrong. The Battle of Britain began in July. Radar gave doubting 15 minutes warning. Park and Lee Mallory scrambled 600 fighters against 2,000 Luftwaffe raiders. Day after day, contrails stitched the summer sky. German bombers learned the Channel was a graveyard. By September, Hitler postponed Sea Lion indefinitely. Air power had saved a nation, but only by defending, not attacking. Across the Atlantic, Roosevelt signed Lend-Lease. Factories in California and Kansas began stamping out P-40s and B-17s. In the Soviet Union, Stalin ignored 90 warnings of Barbarossa. On June 22, 1941, the Luftwaffe caught 1,200 Soviet aircraft on the ground. 3 days later, Moscow's sky was empty. But the Red Air Force had factories beyond the Urals. Women and teenagers riveted Yak-1s under camouflage nets. In Berlin, Milch tripled aircraft production. By 1941, Germany built 11,000 planes. Quantity was becoming a quality of its own. The age of air supremacy had arrived, yet no one agreed what it meant. Could bombers win alone? Could fighters stop them? Could carriers replace battleships? The answers would be written in fire over London, Pearl Harbor, Midway, Stalingrad, Schweinfurt, Hiroshima. The spark lit in 1918 was now a furnace. The world had 9 years of peace to prepare. It spent 8 of them disarming. When the storm broke, the sky decided who lived and who burned. December 7th, 1941, 3:19 a.m. local. 6 Japanese carriers turned into the wind 230 miles north of Oahu. Kate torpedo bombers, Val dive bombers, and Zero fighters lifted in perfect silence, moonlight glinting on rising sun roundels. At 7:49 a.m., Lieutenant Commander Fuchida radioed Tora, Tora, Tora. Surprise achieved. Pearl Harbor slept. Battleship Row took the first wave. Arizona exploded in a 500-foot fireball. 1,177 men gone in seconds. Oklahoma capsized like a toy. West Virginia settled in flaming oil. Only the carriers, Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, were absent, at sea by chance. In 90 minutes, Japan crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet for less than 30 aircraft. Yamamoto knew 6 months was all he had. American industry would awake. His plan: seize the southern resource area, oil in the Dutch East Indies, rubber in Malaya, before the counterstroke. Air power was the spear. December 10th, from Formosa, G-3M and G-4M bombers struck Clark Field in the Philippines at noon. American P-40s still on the ground, lined wingtip to wingtip. Half the Far East Air Force vanished in 2 hours. MacArthur's army retreated to Bataan. Manila fell by New Year. Simultaneously, Prince of Wales and Repulse steamed north to interrupt Japanese landings in Malaya. No air cover, carrier delayed, fighters outranged. At 11:13 a.m. December 10th, 88 land-based bombers found them. Torpedoes marched in perfect salvos. In 20 minutes, the Royal Navy lost its only capital ships east of Suez. Churchill wept. By February 1942, Singapore surrendered. 85,000 British, Australian, Indian troops to 35,000 Japanese. The fortress had guns facing seaward. The enemy came through jungle, covered by K-43 Oscars overhead. The Zero ruled. Mitsubishi A6M2, long-range, brutal climb, 20mm cannon, outturned, outclimbed, outranged anything Allied. American pilots in P-40s learned the hard way: never dogfight a Zero. Hit and run. Across the Indian Ocean, Nagumo's carriers raided Ceylon. April 5th, Easter Sunday. Somerville's fleet scattered. Hermes, Cornwall, Dorsetshire sank in minutes under Val dive bombers. Colombo burned. The Royal Navy retreated to East Africa. Yet cracks appeared. At Coral Sea, May 7th and 8th, 1942, carriers fought carriers for the first time, never in sight. Yorktown and Lexington versus Shokaku and Zuikaku. Radioed scout reports, clumsy code, desperate launches. Shoho went down in 4 minutes under 93 American aircraft, scratch 1 flat top. Lexington took 2 torpedoes, 1 bomb, then her own avgas vapors ignited. She burned through the night. Tactically, a draw. Strategically, Japan lost the initiative. Port Moresby saved, Shokaku damaged, Zuikaku's air group gutted. June 4th, Midway. Yamamoto split his fleet. Carriers north, battleships south, Aleutians faint. Fletcher and Spruance had codebreakers. At 4:30 a.m., PBY Catalinas found Nagumo. Torpedo Squadron 8 launched from Hornet. 15 Devastators, no fighters. Obsolete. Zeros carved them like paper. 1 survivor, Ensign Gay. But the sacrifice pulled the combat air patrol low. At 10:22 a.m., dauntless dive bombers fell out of the sun. In 5 minutes, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu burned. Hiryu struck back, Yorktown crippled, but Waldron, McCluskey, and Best rewrote naval history. 4 Japanese carriers for 1 American. The Imperial Navy never recovered. On Guadalcanal, August 7th, Marines waded ashore under Henderson Field's future runway. Japanese bombers came daily from Rabaul, Betty, Zero, Val. Cactus Air Force, F-4F Wildcats, SBDs, even P-400 rejects fought from a muddy strip. Every gallon of avgas, every bullet, every pilot came by ship through Iron Bottom Sound. Tokyo Express ran nightly. American destroyers answered. In the slot, radar-guided 5-inch guns dueled searchlights. Overhead, Black Shoe carrier ops were gone forever. By Christmas 1942, Japan had lost 4,000 aircraft, 2,000 irreplaceable pilots. The perimeter, Rabaul, Truk, Saipan, still looked formidable, but the factory pipeline was one way. Mitsubishi built 2,400 Zeros in 1942. Grumman would build 12,000 Hellcats by 1945. America learned fast. Thatch weave, boom and zoom, skip bombing, PT boat coordination. Essex-class carriers slid down ways every month. Hellcat, Corsair, Avenger rolled out tougher, faster, folding wings for hangar decks. Japan bet on spirit over steel. Pilots trained 6 months, not 2 years. Fuel ran short. Instructors stayed at the front. By 1943, new pilots arrived with 40 hours total time. The tide turned not in a single battle, but in 1,000 small ones, over Tulagi, Munda, the Bismarck Sea, where low-level B-25s mast-headed Japanese transports. Air power had promised quick victory. Now it demanded attrition. The Empire of the Rising Sun reached its zenith at noon over Pearl Harbor. 6 months later, the sun began to set. Summer 1942. Over the Ruhr, RAF Bomber Command flew at night. Stirling and Halifax heavy with incendiaries. Harris believed cities were the target. Workers, morale, factories, all in one. Cologne, May 30. 1,047 bombers, the first 1,000 raid. 30,000 fires merged into one. 486 dead. 45,000 homeless. The Rhine reflected hell. Daylight was American business. August 17, 12 B-17s from the 97th Bomb Group hit Rouen rail yards. Escorted only to the coast by Spitfires, they dropped 18 tons and returned intact. Eaker cabled spots. "We can do this." The Schweinfurt myth began. Ball bearings, Germany's war machine, spun on 36 million a month from 2 factories. October 14, 1943. 291 fortresses unescorted beyond the Rhine. P-47s turned back at the limit of drop tanks. 109s and 190s waited in waves. 60 B-17s fell. 590 airmen lost or captured. Production dipped 2 weeks, then recovered. The lesson? Bombers needed long-range fighters. Enter the P-51 Mustang. North American NA-73X prototype flew in 1940. Packard Merlin turned it into legend. January 1944, D models with 85-gallon belly tanks reached Berlin easily. Doolittle flipped 8th Fighter Command doctrine. Destroy the Luftwaffe wherever it flies. Big week, February 20th to 25th. 1,000 bombers daily, escorted all the way. Factories at Leipzig, Augsburg, Regensburg hammered. Luftwaffe rose to defend. Mustangs pounced. In 7 days, Germany lost 28% of its single-engine fighters. Experienced pilots became extinct. On the ground, air power learned new tricks. June 6, 1944, D-Day. Overnight, 1,100 RAF heavies dropped 5,000 tons on coastal batteries. At dawn, 2,200 Allied aircraft owned Normandy's sky. Marauders and Typhoons, with 60-pound rockets, shredded panzer columns on the Falaise Road. Rommel's chief of staff. The day was one continuous explosion. Airborne divisions dropped behind Utah Beach. Gliders crashed through hedgerows. Pathfinders with Eureka beacons guided 800 C-47s in moonless dark. Only 3% missed drop zones. Overhead, the Luftwaffe managed 319 sorties total on D-Day. Allied air forces flew 14,674. Goering watched from Berchtesgaden. His eagle had no wings. Oil became the choke point. Ploisti raids since 1943 were costly. 53 B-24s lost in one low-level tidal wave. Spring 1944, 15th Air Force from Italy, escorted by P-38s and P-51s, hit synthetic plants at high altitude. May 12th, Lerna Works crippled. By September, Speer reported 200,000 tons monthly shortfall. Panzers sat idle for want of 110 octane. Transportation plan. Eisenhower wanted railways smashed before Overlord. Lee Mallory predicted 80,000 French civilian deaths. Churchill balked. Tedder persuaded. From March to June, 70,000 tons of bombs severed every bridge over the Seine. On D+3, only 2 German divisions crossed the river, both by ferry. The V weapons came too late. June 13th, first V1 buzzed London. Spitfires learned to tip them with wingtips. Tempests outran them. Mosquito night fighters hunted launch sites. By September, 8,000 V1s launched. 2,400 reached the city. V2 was untouchable. Ballistic, silent. Peenemünde raided August 17, 1943. 40 B-17s, 376 tons, delayed the program 6 months. Still, 3,000 rockets fell on London and Antwerp. Each carried 1 ton of amytal. Each cost as much as 200 fighters. Jet age arrived in combat. July 25, 1944. Gloucester Meter shot down a V-1. Me-262 Schwab flew operationally September, 540 miles per hour, 4 30mm cannon. Too few, too late. Fuel starvation, pilot shortages, and Allied strafing of airfields kept them grounded. Strategic bombing debate raged. Post-war surveys showed German production peaked in 1944, despite 1.2 million tons of bombs. Speer dispersed factories, used slave labor, and rebuilt faster than rubble cleared. Morale never broke. Absenteeism rose, but output did too. Yet the Luftwaffe died. From 1942 to 1944, Germany built 39,000 fighters. 29,000 were lost. By January 1945, Training Command had 60 gallons of fuel per student, total. New pilots arrived with 100 hours. Allied pilots had 400. Operation Argument, Bodenplatte, Clarion, names blurred into one long slaughter. January 1st, 1945, 900 Luftwaffe aircraft surprised Allied airfields in the Ardennes counteroffensive aftermath. 300 Allied planes destroyed, mostly on the ground, but 277 German aircraft lost, 62 pilots killed. The Luftwaffe's last gasp. Fortress Europe had no roof. From the Volga to the Channel, the sky belonged to olive drab and silver. Bombers flew in formations 100 miles long. Fighters roamed in packs. German cities burned nightly. By day, Mustangs hunted anything with a cross. The bomber barons had not won the war alone, but they had made the ground war possible. Without air supremacy, Normandy would have been another Dieppe. Without oil starvation, tigers would have prowled to the scene. Harris kept bombing Berlin until April 1945. Spots shifted to oil and rails. Dresden, February 13th. 800 Lancasters, firestorm, 25,000 dead. Controversy still burns. The sky was now the decisive battlefield. Below it, armies advanced under an umbrella no enemy could pierce.